Okay, so yeah, there. I'm taking this time to introduce you one of the, let's say, elephant in the crystal room, which is this huge national initiative which just started in Italy. I can't remember how we picked up this title, but I find the Dare adventure in the program. While you will hear later Lynn talking about the Mobilise journey, so I'm thinking, well, journey is fine. You know, if you look at the Cambridge Dictionary, a journey is simply a trip from one place to another. So kind of easy. Well, and it's also, you know, quite true because it's also a path that is close to an end, as you will hear. While an adventure, it's a bit more tricky, you know, because it's an exciting and sometimes dangerous experience, you know. So think of something like these old strips, cartoons, you know, from UK in the 50s with this Dan Dare pilot of the future. And, well, kind of what is actually what we are experiencing right now with all the team that is engaged in this project. Where are we? So what's the scenario in which this initiative started? It's the National Recovery and Resilience Plan you may have heard about. It's in the framework of Next Generation EU, which is particularly impactful for Italy. Something like globally about 250 billion euro initiative for investments in 6 major areas, including digitalization, innovation, the Green Deal, infrastructures, education and research, but health is also one of those, as well as inclusion and cohesion. And so we got there through a plan, which is maybe something trivial, but I would say something not so trivial for Italy in general, to have a long-term planning, to have a clear policy framework looking at the next generation somehow. So we find facing a situation in which we have, as a starting point, such a policy framework. And so within this framework, within this initiative, as part of the national co-funding to the European money, the national government, and in particular the Italian Ministry for University and Research, funded a national flagship initiative for 4-year projects in the field of research initiatives for technologies and innovative trajectories in the health and care sectors. This started, well, actually, we submitted our proposal just 1 year ago. It was midsummer, so in August 2022, and then we got our scores and reviews in late October, and then we started in December. So really tight timeline. And so we're now at about half of the first year of the initiative. The main focus we picked up for our project when preparing the application to the Ministry for University and Research was health data valorization and prevention. So a couple of keywords that you have heard about already in Beatrix's presentation. But other projects that were funded are rooted, for example, in robotics and digital tools, in remote monitoring, and in digital twins for health. So overall, 4 national flagships were funded. We decided to leverage the potential of data in relation to the health ecosystem. working to enhance the tools we have, but also the knowledge, which is a multidisciplinary knowledge, which is needed, and the processes that also must be there to allow to exploit such a tremendous potential of the data. And we are talking about health data, that's clear, but also data that are not natively health data, but that can say something in relation to health. So, for example, data coming from the real world, movement, mobility, again, the climate and the environment, and so far. To do what? To come up with, finally, since this is the Cinderella in the terms of funding in the health domain, of new solutions for a better prevention. So the idea we had is, let's invest in digital transformation and digital technologies to finally make prevention a reality. So we are so far from other areas of investment that it's definitely the time to take advantage of all we have in terms of technology to introduce such a shift in our system. In the face of challenges that Beatrix so nicely presented, which are of course Norwegian, which are of course global, and not less Italian. As you know, Italy is one of the countries in which the aging of the population is pronounced, and in particular, the old age dependency ratio is already the highest in Europe. It was 36.4% in 2020, and this is still constantly growing. In this framework, of course, there's the growing dimension of chronic diseases and non-communicable diseases, also in relation to the aging of the population. And as we have experienced during the COVID pandemic, there are global challenges for health coming, for example, from viruses or extreme weather events as the one that we have mentioned and we are experiencing globally. And so we came up with this idea to keep together digital technologies, digital tools, and prevention. And so we came also up with an acronym which is DARE, or DARE, intentionally, because there's a twofold interpretation you can give to the name of the project. Indeed, dare in Italian means simply to give, and the idea we really wanted to have crystal clear in our mind, but also in the mind of our stakeholder, is that this is an incredible opportunity. It's one in a lifetime, opportunity to make innovation, and so we have a huge social responsibility for this. Well, I can tell you, but this is a 124 million euro project, okay? So something like, let's say, depending on the size, but several times the largest European grants you can get. And so that's very clear that there's a huge responsibility behind this. But on the other hand, and we are back to Captain Dare, of course, Dare in English means to have the courage to challenge. And so having clear the responsibility behind this, what we are trying to do is to move forward to help the system, the national and then hopefully international healthcare system, to look at the future with courage, to also, thanks to opportunities like this summer school, to listen to interpret and to design innovative solutions which are brave enough to challenge the conservation, the preservation of existing systems and solutions. And so there are these macro trends which reflect, if you look at the disability-adjusted life years or the global burden of disease. These are data from Italy, but you find similar results also for other countries. In the top 10 causes of disability, 9 are non-communicable diseases, such as, let's say, of course, heart disease or diabetes or stroke. There is one injury, which is fall-related issues. Behind this, there's a huge room for improvement in terms of prevention of such conditions, which means preventing falls, but also preventing non-communicable diseases, which have a relatively large amount of risk factors which are modifiable. And so what we proposed to the ministry, and then we are discussing this also with the Italian Ministry for Health, is to help move from an approach which is largely focused on diagnosis and treatment to investments which are more oriented toward prevention and community approach. Of course, you can assess the importance of prevention when you see the consequences of its failure. We have experienced this with COVID and any communicable disease and epidemic. Still, prevention, we all know, can be life-saving and cost-saving in all domains of disease control. And so a lack of appropriate prevention is catastrophic, not just for communicable diseases, but also for non-communicable diseases and also for endemic conditions. Just to make an example, in the field of cancer, we have data which are unfortunately raising a lot. Let's say 1 in 5 men and 1 in 6 women will develop cancer in their lifetime, and 1 man in 8 and 1 woman in 11 will die of cancer. These are recent statistics. But actions based on our current knowledge of risk factors could prevent 40% of these cancers. We already have this knowledge. The challenge now is take this knowledge into action, turn this into actionable solutions that our healthcare systems can put in place for designing, for example, effective screening campaign, for monitoring the risk factors on a regular basis. Also not forgetting about health inequalities that also Beatrix mentioned, which are unfortunately increasing worldwide, that are preventing a lot from the possible positive impact of such actions. When thinking what to tell you about such a project, it's not, just a communication at a conference, this one. So the idea is try to help you understand what can be learned from this experience, which just started, okay? So I'm not gonna present you results of the project, but rather the general idea, the framework, and also how we got there. And this can be also a good way to proceed, for example, in your project work in the coming days. I told you that we have a policy framework. And so what we did was actually to look at the white papers and the policy framework that was recently updated in Italy. So we took this as a lens, if you wish, to analyze the overall situation in Italy in relation to prevention. And so we focused in particular on gaps and needs. And we identified a number of strategies that were put in place by the national government. For example, a national health prevention hub, or a national health, environment, climate prevention system, and the national pandemic hub. But this is a work underway, so it's something that was designed within the framework of the recovery and resilience plan. So again, these are processes which just started. And so we thought to align, to synchronize with this process, reorganization, and priority setting at the national level by adding, in a way, a layer which is an innovation layer, a digital transformation layer, collecting among the best skills we had in the country to support such an innovation. And so, for example, what these documents identified in relation to health data in particular is that most of this health data is not exploitable. There is lack of evidence. So it's a very long story. You have heard it several times, you know, prevent is better than cure, and so far, but still, often we lack the evidence of the benefit of preventive actions. In particular, we lack the evidence of the added value of digital solutions in the field. So how digitally enabled health systems can outperform other strategies and solutions. We will hear a lot about this from several stakeholders in the coming days, in particular on Wednesday. And so lack of evidence, don't forget this, is really crucial. And so it calls also for additional research and additional implementation research in particular. There's the inability to deploy and scale digital innovation. So oftentimes we just are happy with small scale demonstrators, with pilots, with solutions that seems to work, but then they fail to upscale to larger groups, larger populations. And again, as Beatrix was saying, there's a tremendous lack of digital skills, and there's a tremendous labor shortage we have to face. And so this is the picture in terms of gaps and needs that the official documents identified. And if you read carefully, there are even more detailed gaps that the national government identified. I will not go through all of them, but for example, they realize that governing the data, the big data deluge we are immersed in is really a nightmare, or might be a nightmare. And so they call for the need of reinforcing the data governance capabilities, also in the light that we have to deal with structured data in the national information systems flows, as well as more and more non-structured data flows, such as the one, for example, generated by the electronic health record. There's the need to integrate such a capability to collect data then with the capability to process this data. And so, for example, they call for the support of developing high-performance computational tools to build new healthcare planning and prevention scenarios to simulate the impact in economical healthcare needs and lifestyle, as well as improve machine learning and artificial intelligence tools in order to elaborate and simulate different programmatic scenarios. And so far, These are notes taken from the official documents. Again, when looking at gaps and needs, this is specific for Italy. I'm not sure if this holds true also for other countries, but for sure, you know, rather than a data deluge, we have a data nightmare. So the data related to health are widespread, jeopardized in so many different directions, stored in very different ways, owned by very different stakeholders, that it's really hard to integrate, to cross-link, for example, data about the electronic health record rather than the drug prescription and so far. The registries, the data banks, biobanks, and so far. So far, there was a lot of interest towards the administrative data to manage the expenses and the costs of the system. And this picture, very fragmented picture, is one also of the challenges that other initiatives in the National Resilience Plan is facing about the development of a new integrated information system. And then there are unmet needs which are specific to the area, for example, of secondary and tertiary prevention, which means that once you can collect this data, so some of this might be relevant for what you will hear about Mobilise-D as an example, and some of these were actually dealt with by Mobilise-D. So the standardization of procedures, the heterogeneity of samples and cohorts, the lack of follow-up, the depth of phenotyping, the statistical power. So several times, as I told you, our knowledge is limited in terms of sample size, of generalizability is an issue. And so the strategy, what we came up with to face this complex issue and this long list of gaps and needs was not to forget this complexity, not to hide this complexity, but really to fully engage with this complexity. And this, if you wish, is also a message to you as early career researcher. Do not escape complexity a priori. So we kept complexity as part of our strategy, looking at what technology can offer. And when we say technology, we really think at very diverse pieces of technologies, very diverse enabling technologies, including, of course, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, high performance computing, machine learning, but also bioinformatics to a different scale, epidemiology and digital twins, so computational models, keeping together also specialists from the field of statistics, from the field of economics, from the field of ethics and law, which are similarly important to ensure that such a huge transformation can be fruitful. And also being aware that data are key, data are relevant, but data is not enough. So we are struggling a lot to collect data, to link data, to establish data banking, but then you know, sometimes the investment and the effort stops here to establish very nice data sets. Well, then the story is just at the entry level. You need to move further climbing this pyramid, if you wish. So it's the DIKV pyramid, so moving from data to information, from information to knowledge, and then from knowledge to value or wisdom, if you wish, adding value. So, and then you need creativity, you need out-of-the-box thinking, you need cross-fertilization and contamination among different disciplines to really look at the data in the best way possible and in an original way also. That is what we will try to achieve to get to digital prevention solution. And we talk about digital prevention, meaning here those actions in relation to health promotion and prevention that are enabled somehow by digital technologies with a potential to significantly improve the speed and the accuracy of a number of key public health functions. And you can think, for example, at actions such as forecasting, as surveillance of a population, or the early detection and response to acute and chronic diseases, or the detection and monitoring of health-related conditions through the lifespan. In an organization, it is a project of projects in which there's a spoke which is horizontal and is looking at these enabling factors and technologies. And then there are two spokes specifically focusing on primary prevention and secondary and tertiary prevention. Targeting the general population or selected groups of individuals, and spoke 2 for primary prevention, and specific classes of patients for secondary and tertiary prevention. And just to make you a few examples, the spoke 2 focusing on primary prevention has initiatives which have been selected and are now in the phase of setting up and designing demonstrators in relation to the link between health, environment, and climate change, improve registries through also interoperability platforms, or primary prevention of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, the promotion of healthy lifestyles, occupational health, digital technology and paths to support vaccination and immunization, or digital tools to prevent falls and accidents, and so far. So you see here, the focus is really to introduce a bit of digital technologies into the way in which the general population look at health-related issues, moving the focus to prevention rather than to diagnosis and care. While on spoke 3, focusing on secondary and tertiary prevention with tools such as artificial intelligence for risk prediction, or medical technology for rehabilitation, or digital models and platform. But the focus is, for example, on osteoskeletal disorders, on frailty, sarcopenia, and neurorehabilitation, or cancer prevention, the prediction of non-communicable diseases such as cardiovascular, cancer, bowel disease, kidney failure, cognitive and psychiatric diseases, solid organ transplant, and or, for example, some biomechanical related diseases, in a structure in which spoke 1 is supporting and consulting the spoke 2 and spoke 3 in releasing valid and innovative solutions. So it's kind of Mr. Wolf trying to solve problems. So here we have the instances which are generated from the field, so with a lot of medical specialists here, and here there is the multidisciplinary team which is with a co-creation loop, interacting with all these studies to help innovation and to help exploit in the best way possible digital solutions. So far, we have 58 projects underway, as you see, the breakdown in tertiary, secondary, and primary prevention, and also in the disease areas in which these are focusing, mostly metabolic, then neurological, oncological, musculoskeletal, geriatrics, and so far, with a framework which, thanks to this multidisciplinarity, is looking at each one and every of these pilots, of these studies, taking into account the clinical needs and policy analysis behind, the ethical legal framework, the interoperability issues, the technological issues, strictly speaking, but also the impact analysis. So quantifying which is the added value of introducing a digital solution into a state-of-the-art framework. And finally, considering also the translation, the clinical translation and commercial exploitation of the results. With a partnership which is national, so we have beautiful cities involved, and we have partners through 5 main regions in Italy, so Veneto with Padua, Emilia-Romagna with several centers in Bologna, Parma, and Romagna here, Lazio with several centers in Rome, Puglia with Bari mostly, and Sicilia with Palermo and Catania involved. And again, this is a message for you about complexity and multidisciplinarity. Look at the spectrum of the disciplines. You see how colorful it is. So yes, of course, we have about 35%, 37% of specialists in the team that we collected who comes from the medical field, but then we also have a lot of information engineering, physics, mathematics and informatics, statistics, ethics and law, humanities, because there's a lot of room also for humanities. We are working with philosophers, for example, in relation to the communication of health-related issues. With universities, of course, but then with a lot of research hospitals on board and public health authorities, with private companies, private hospitals, and other institutions such as the National Institute of Nuclear Physics or the Regional Agency for Environmental Protection in Sicily, or the Jimbe Foundation. So, and I'm going to conclude my talk. As I told you, we are struggling with this complexity right now. We are setting up the process, which took a while, of course. Unfortunately, we have an amazing team in Bologna and throughout the country. And the idea is really, if we achieve our final goal, to establish Italy, affirm Italy as a leading country in the field of digital prevention, building trustworthy and secure digital ecosystems for sustainable and effective prevention, and most importantly, really create a community of multiple stakeholders in which all of you are invited to join, of course. And that's why we started already the recruitment process. It's underway. These are tentative figures, but overall we have more than 100 research positions for research associate, and more than 60 PhD scholarships. Some of these have already been granted, and some of the winners are in the room. But I have to tell you that some actually were not, and so there will be also some future openings, both at the University of Bologna and in the other academic institutions in the consortium. If you want more information, of course, we can talk during this week, but you can also start finding some info online in the LinkedIn webpage or on Twitter. Thank you for your attention.